Just yesterday, Masha's life seemed happy and carefree, but today she learned a terrible secret and realized that she was only being used, as she had not noticed before. The girl did not understand how she allowed herself to get involved in this circus, becoming the centerpiece of the program. Masha stood up, stroked her round belly, and began to think about what to do and where to run. She could not stay in her future mother-in-law's house, and there was very little time left before the birth in her late grandmother's cold house. Masha needed to figure out where to find shelter. She also needed to somehow get out of the village and reach the city. It was already getting dark outside, and if Masha didn't hurry, she would have to wait until morning, which was dangerous. "What happened to you?" Irina, her longtime friend, got out of the car. "Good thing I'm not on duty today." "What have you come up with?" The girl frowned. "Just please, let's keep this between us. I'll tell you everything on the way." They hurried to leave before her mother-in-law realized that she had run away. "She thinks I'm sleeping." "It's all strange," Masha said. After Masha told her why she was leaving home in the middle of the night, Irina shook her head. "Okay, let's go to my place, and we'll figure it out from there." After an hour and a half, they arrived at Irina's house, where Masha fell asleep. When she woke up, it was already light outside. Masha went to the kitchen to get some water and heard the sound of water in the bathroom. She realized that her friend had already woken up and was probably getting ready for work. It was fortunate that she had not left yet. Masha wanted to discuss with Irina the possibility of staying with her for a while until she figured out where she could hide. She poured water from the pitcher and took a few greedy sips before the phone on the table next to her vibrated. Masha glanced at her gadgets, realizing it was her friend's mobile phone, and turned away. But the next moment, she was already swiping the touch screen of the message to make sure the sender's name wasn't just her imagination. "I'll make sure she doesn't go anywhere by lunch. I need her alive and unharmed, especially her child. Read the last message from Sergey." Masha scrolled up the conversation and realized she couldn't trust Irina anymore. According to the messages, she had written to Sergey yesterday that Masha was at her home and the water in the bathroom had stopped running. Masha put the phone back in its place and hurried to the room, where she grabbed her things and rushed out the door. She hid behind a tree in a small park near the house and watched as her former friend ran out of the entrance and looked around. She couldn't have gone far. "I wasn't gone for more than a few minutes, and when I went to take a shower, she was still sleeping, so she must be nearby, and I'll find her." "Don't worry," Irina shouted indignantly into the phone. Masha shook her head, disappointed in yet another person. After Irina got into her car and left, Masha pulled the hood of her sweatshirt over her head and wandered aimlessly. At first, she wanted to call her mother, who was currently vacationing with another lover in Europe, but she immediately dismissed the idea because her mother and Olga Ivanovna, Sergey's mother, were very close friends, and she would likely start meddling in her life and insist that she return to Sergey. It was a warm autumn day, but after a few hours, Masha was freezing, hungry, thirsty, and had no idea where to go. She had forgotten her phone in Irina's apartment, and even if she had it, it wouldn't have helped since Sergey could track her down if he wanted to. Track down! The girl sat on a bench in the shade of trees and quietly cried. She began to attract the attention of passers-by who approached her and asked if she needed help. Therefore, Masha had to leave her temporary shelter and look for a new one. She wandered down the street, not noticing anyone or anything around her, but suddenly her gaze focused on a bright golden sign for a pawn shop. It occurred to her to search her hoodie pocket, and Masha found the ring that Sergey had given her for their engagement. The ring was clearly not cheap, with a diamond, and Masha decided that now was the time to get rid of it. Deep down, the girl was glad that they never got to the wedding, as when Masha found out that she was pregnant, Sergey, like a true gentleman, proposed to her. They planned to get married in a couple of months, but suddenly Sergey's mother fell ill. Although Masha never understood exactly what she was sick with, she suspected that there was no illness at all. Sergey's future mother-in-law went abroad for half a year, supposedly for treatment, and Sergey decided that they wouldn't have the wedding until his mother recovered. A couple of weeks ago, Olga Ivanovna returned, tanned and glowing with health, and Masha raised the question of marriage again, but they brushed her off like a pesky fly. Sergey calmed his fiancée by saying that she wouldn't be in the mood for celebrating at her own wedding, and promised that as soon as the baby was born, they would have a small celebration. But now, looking back, the girl realized that she was in a more advantageous position as an unmarried woman. And now that she had some money, she could hide more securely. She rang the doorbell and the door closed smoothly behind her. Looking at the setting September sun, Masha smiled at her luck. She got more for the ring than she had expected, and even with the most modest calculations, the money she had would last her a couple of weeks. If she was economical, it could last her a month. Masha decided to eat as her stomach had been giving her signals for a while now. Afterwards, she planned to buy some clothing and find a place to stay in a hotel or hostel. Masha didn't want to spend too much money, and without documents, it was unlikely she would be allowed in a hotel. However, she could afford a bed in a hostel. She even came up with a story that her bag with her documents had been stolen and she needed to wait for her relatives to arrive for a couple of nights. After a filling lunch at the canteen, Masha went to the market and bought some clothes and a pair of comfortable autumn boots. She also bought a spacious backpack where she put the purchased clothes, a towel, and hygiene products just in case. Masha bought a cap and dark glasses for disguise. Later, she went to an internet cafe where she researched nearby hospitals and hospices. While wandering around the city during the day, she came up with a plan to give birth in the hospital where she was registered. However, if what Olga Ivanovna said was true, that everything in that hospital was bought, including the staff, she needed to find a new safe place to give birth and possibly stay afterwards. Masha didn't know what to do with the baby once it was born or where to go with it. She decided to think about it later and focus on giving birth first. After spending the evening in a cafe and researching hospitals in detail, Masha decided to focus on an experimental clinic located in the suburbs. From what she read online, the clinic accepted pregnant women with various fetal pathologies. It looked decent and legal, but she needed to figure out how to get there and make sure it was safe. Masha thoroughly researched the information and read reviews that indicated the chief doctor of the clinic, Gleb Alexandrovich Arsky, was reliable. Only a doctor sent from God and a professor, as well as a very good person, had many positive reviews from patients online, all of whom spoke of the honesty and kindness of this person. It was specifically to him that Masha wanted to go the next day. The girl set out on her journey and decided to take a taxi, even though it cost her a pretty penny. She didn't want to risk being seen at the station and then shaking on the bus for another 2 hours with the driver. After admiring the beautiful wrought iron gates, the territory adjacent to the clinic, which occupied several hectares, seemed to Masha like a royal estate from another century. Paved paths, landscaped alleys, a beautiful pond, and a stone bridge with intricate patterned railings enjoying this beauty, the girl didn't notice how she reached the stone booth at the end of the alley. Judging by the modern electric barrier that the asphalt road on the other side of the alley led to, this was the entrance to the clinic's territory. Pedestrians could pass through the gate, but the difficulty was that it was opened by a guard who clearly wasn't ready to let everyone in. "Do you have an appointment?" a sturdy man asked, in a way, scouting. Masha charmingly smiled and, for greater persuasiveness, took off her cap, shaking a bunch of chestnut hair. Do you have a direction? Are you going for an examination? The girl nodded for an examination and, if lucky, she would stay. She hysterically giggled, realizing that she had blurted out too much, but continued, do you have a pass? The man didn't back down. No, but I need to see the chief doctor and I'm sure he'll give me a referral. Masha smiled again, hoping to melt the health worker's heart. This is not some polyclinic where you can just come and visit a doctor. This is a research clinic where you can only get in with a referral. Your pass, please. The man switched his attention to the driver. Just arrived car. Sorry, miss, but I can't let you in. The guard shrugged and looked with regret at the round belly. You should go home, it's already around 3 o'clock. Masha lingered by the security booth, occasionally sitting on the nearby bench. She made several attempts to persuade him, but the man remained unyielding. It was evident that he didn't want to refuse the pregnant girl, but he couldn't break the work rules. I have nowhere to go, Masha sighed sadly, rubbing her back and lowering her head as she settled onto the bench where she would apparently have to spend the night. A couple of hours later, the girl regretted coming here and scolded herself for being foolish and careless. She now realized the mistake she had made and that she hadn't even considered how to get back to the city if her plan didn't work out. She had hoped that luck would be on her side and hadn't even considered any other options. Masha cried for herself, her unborn child, and the situation in which she was forced to hide and hide, almost 8 months pregnant. Where's the nearest bus stop or station? She asked the guard, sniffling and not looking him in the eye. It's about 6 or 7 kilometers away. It's better to call a taxi, he replied. Thank you, the girl nodded and turned to walk along the alley. Hey, what's your name? It's too late to walk with such a belly. I'm telling you to call a taxi, he said. I can't. I came here by taxi, and I saw you when I got out of the car at the gate. But I can't go back because I don't have a phone, Masha explained, throwing her hands up in frustration and bursting into tears again. The man seemed irritated, but he tried his best to control his anger. Go sit on the bench and wait. In 20 to 30 minutes, the chief doctor will be leaving for home, and I'll ask him if he can see you tomorrow. He's a decent guy, but I warn you that it doesn't guarantee anything. He may send you away. Okay, he said. I agree that they've sent me far away, so I'm not scared. I don't have any other options, so the girl didn't have time to negotiate as her head started buzzing and she began to slowly collapse, trying to grab the man's hand. Damn it, he exclaimed, deftly embracing her limp body and looking around for a place to put Masha. Just then, the chief doctor's car appeared at the turn and stopped in front of the booth. The worried doctor jumped out of the car to help the guard to Muffy. What's going on here, Gleb Alexandrovich? The guard started rambling. This lady has been hanging around here all day and wants to see you, but she doesn't have any documents. Someone stole her folder with the documents, he lied, not knowing why. Maybe because he really felt sorry for this girl, as his wife was also in the last month of pregnancy and he understood how difficult it was for a woman to get through the last days before giving birth. Judging by the girl's belly, she was far along as well. Why didn't you call me? The doctor protested, putting his fingers on the girl's neck. Come with me in the car. She's pale and her pulse is barely palpable. Carefully placing Masha in the back seat, the guard closed the door and the car immediately started moving, turning around and returning to the clinic building. When Masha opened her eyes, she didn't immediately understand where she was. The subdued light on the windows, the bright beige walls decorated with pictures of beautiful landscapes, the tray with a pitcher and a glass of water on the bedside table, and the vase with beautiful flowers on the other side of the bed indicated that she was most likely in the hospital. Judging by the smell, they were alive. The girl saw the drip and followed the direction of the tube, discovering that the drip was installed in her vein through a catheter. Masha smiled, realizing that she was probably in the same clinic she had been trying so hard to get to. All she remembered was talking to the guard, and then everything went dark. Masha shuddered when the doors opened and a tall, slender man in glasses and a white coat entered. He appeared to be no more than 45 years old. "Hello," greeted Dr. Arsky Gleb Alexandrovich, the chief physician of the clinic. "Hello," replied Masha, trying to be friendly so she wouldn't be thrown out immediately. "My name is Maria, and I don't have any documents, unfortunately. I know Timofey already told you that they were stolen from me." "Yes, that's right," nodded Masha, realizing that no matter who Timofey was, she was ready to kiss him right now. "And who is Timofey?" she asked, guessing that he was talking about a big guy. "He's our security guard. You passed out and he kindly helped you." He smiled and then frowned. "Why didn't you inform us of your visit? Usually, we make appointments with our patients in advance. But I looked and didn't find any record for today. I didn't make an appointment because I don't have a phone, but I needed to see you urgently. I have a pathology." "What's the term? Who referred you?" The doctor bombarded Masha with questions. 36 weeks, and neither my baby nor I have any pathologies, at least none were previously detected, replied Masha seriously. "Can I trust you?" she asked the doctor, furrowing her brow. The doctor frowned even more. "I understand that everything looks very strange, but I really have nowhere else to turn. Someone wants to sell my baby." "What? Excuse me?" The doctor's eyebrows shot up. "I'm not crazy. Our lives depend on you now. Please listen to me." "All right, tell me." Gleb moved his chair closer to the bed where Masha lay and patiently listened. "At first, I had no idea. But after the conversation I overheard, everything fell into place and I realized that even thinking about it was terrifying." Masha sighed and shook her head. The doctor looked at her intently and waited patiently. "My future husband, Sergei, was always too sensitive or something about my pregnancy, but not to me. His mother, too. When he found out that I was pregnant, he immediately proposed to me. But until the wedding never happened, one thing or another. In the end, we decided to wait until the baby was born. I was dragged to all kinds of tests. I don't think there is any analysis that I haven't taken, and Sergei was always with me. At first, I was happy that he was so caring, but one day I forgot to make a copy of some tests and he yelled so loudly that I thought the windows in the house would crack. The doctor was surprised by the copies of the tests. It was strange. He asked for copies of all the ultrasounds and medical records. When I asked why it was so important, he always answered vaguely and referred to the fact that the main chart could be lost and these stupid copies would be needed to recover it. I already have a whole box of these papers. But why do you think someone wants to sell your baby? Maybe your Sergei is really meticulous about paperwork. I'm not like that myself, by the way. It only had to do with my pregnancy. At his request, I even kept a diary where I described my feelings and he constantly took pictures of me from all sides, several times, to remember. But even then, I didn't suspect anything like that. And the day before yesterday, I overheard a conversation between his mother and her promise to pay a large sum of money and settle all formalities. The girl made air quotes and said that right after the birth, the child should disappear. And the documents, the discharge papers, the time of his birth, should be prepared in English because he should be taken abroad immediately. Masha whispered and sobbed. She also said that Sergei had everything under control, and there was nothing to worry about. That's why I ran away, and they're already looking for me. It's only a matter of time before they find me. If you don't help me, she clung to the man's arm with tears in her eyes and begged, Gleb Alexandrovich, please help us. I beg you. It's impossible to give birth in your clinic and then I'll go away with the baby. I'll hide, disappear. Somewhere in general, I'll come up with something. The man stood up from his chair and began pacing around the room, lowering his head and clasping his hands behind his back. He kept shaking his head and moving his lips, muttering something silently. On one hand, as a doctor, as a person, as a man, he wanted to help the poor girl, but on the other hand, as a professional, he couldn't blindly believe her words without any evidence or proof. In the end, she could turn out to be crazy and make everything up, putting his career and reputation at risk. He needed time to think and find a way to verify her words. Why didn't you go to the police? The doctor asked, a reasonable question. Why did you come here? Don't you understand? Masha protested. If they can bribe employees of the clinic where I was being treated and illegally take the baby out of the country, do you think they don't have anyone covering for them? Masha threw her hands up and covered her face. She was already doubting her decision to come to this clinic in the hope of getting help. What if they're all in on it? The thought flashed through her mind. What if he thinks I'm not all there in the head and calls Sergei right now to take away his crazy wife? You know what? I'll probably just go. The girl began to get out of bed. Where are you going? The doctor asked. You said 5 minutes ago that you had nowhere to go. I see your doubts, and I don't want you to take responsibility for me. Masha raised her head and looked the doctor in the eye challengingly. I might as well jump off a bridge. If they take my child away, I won't be able to live like that. So let's not threaten each other or try to manipulate me right now. By the way, what would you do in my place? The girl said in one breath, then sat down on the bed. I would believe you without hesitation, she added. I wouldn't wish anyone to be in my place. Okay, the doctor ran his hands over his face. You'll stay here today, and tomorrow we'll take all the tests to make sure. With your health and the health of the baby, everything is fine for now. The man sighed and looked the girl in the eyes, deciding what to do next. Thank you, whispered Masha, energetically nodding. You're welcome, the man replied, but I need the name of the clinic where you were registered and your husband's surname. He's not my husband, the girl quickly interrupted. I mean the father of the child and his mother, any information that will help me verify and confirm the information. Masha nodded again, but fear shone in her eyes. But how will you be able to verify this? She asked. Don't worry about that, the man replied, choosing his words carefully. I have my own channels. And no one will know your whereabouts, but I need to make sure of something. Can I trust you? The girl whispered. Yes, you can, the man replied. I understand everything, and thank you very much, Gleb Alexandrovich, for listening and trying to help. You're welcome, the doctor nodded, then left the room. Masha leaned back on the pillows, taking a deep breath. She had negotiated another day with fate, but what would happen next? She decided not to think about it for now, because as soon as she started thinking about her future, tears welled up in her eyes and cold waves of fear ran down her spine. To avoid going crazy with despair, she decided to think about it later. After a delicious dinner, the girl fell into a deep dreamless sleep. The next day, Masha underwent all the recommended tests and examinations, and even visited a psychotherapist, apparently so that Dr. Arsky could verify her sanity. After lunch, they talked to Gleb Alexandrovich for a long time, and Masha told him everything she knew that could help expose everyone involved in this clearly illegal affair. "Can you cook?" the doctor unexpectedly asked. "I'm flustered," Masha muttered. "Why do you ask?" But the man scratched his head. "I can't leave you at the clinic. It will raise suspicion among the staff and unnecessary questions, which is not good for us. What do you suggest?" "I'll take you home with me. I don't spend much time at home, but Rex, my faithful friend, is there and he misses me. As for cooking, I don't like it and I'm not very good at it, so if you don't mind, I suggest you help me with cooking and housework." The girl quickly agreed, realizing that it was the best decision for her at the moment. "What will happen when the baby is born?" Gleb Alexandrovich smiled slightly. "We'll figure it out then." That evening, the doctor took Masha to his home and gave her a tour of the house. He showed her the room where she could stay and gave her some instructions about his food preferences and habits. Rex, the golden retriever with sandy fur, welcomed the guest by licking her hands and curling up at her feet. The next day, Masha made a menu for the week and got it approved by Gleb Alexandrovich. He was pleasantly surprised by her willingness to please him and realized that he had been going home earlier than usual in the past few days. For the first time in years, after his son had gone abroad to study, he really wanted to come home. He looked into the clinic where Masha had been treated, but found nothing suspicious. The doctor who had treated her was not involved in any scandals or questionable activities. Gleb decided to ask for help from his school friend who now works in the authorities and has the necessary connections. Over the next 2 weeks, Masha settled into the doctor's house, and despite her advanced pregnancy, she managed the housework perfectly. She woke up early, cooked breakfast, although Gleb insisted on only having dinner, did the housework, read books, and went for walks with Rex. The doctor's house was not far from the clinic, and it was at the same distance from the city, but it was located in a small village. All the necessities of life, a hypermarket, and even a restaurant where residents could have dinner and relax after a long day of work. It was in this restaurant that the doctor usually ordered his dinner, until Masha arrived. She quietly sat down and didn't leave. Looking at Rex, she sternly said, "Wait, I'll wipe your paws." They had just returned from a walk that had lasted a little longer than expected, but Masha loved to walk in the fresh air, which was something you could only dream of in the city. "Who are you?" a young man asked suspiciously as he emerged from the living room and saw the girl. His eyes widened when he saw Masha's large belly, and she instinctively covered it with her hands. "What are you doing here?" "I live here." "And who are you, miss?" the young man snapped angrily. Masha didn't know what to say and stood by the door, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, unsure of what to do. She had no idea who this guy was, glaring at her with anger in his eyes, ready to pounce. "I'm home," the doctor's voice came from inside. He closed the door and, throwing his backpack on the table, turned around with a smile and saw 2 young people standing there. His smile grew even wider when he saw who was standing before him, putting his hands on his hips and, for some reason, frowning. "Artem, what a surprise to see you." I wanted to hug my son, but he backed away, clearly unhappy about something. "Yeah, Dad, it's a real surprise," the boy muttered through gritted teeth, and looked back at the girl. "I see you've already met Masha," Gleb smiled. "Maria, this is my son, whom I told you about." "Can you explain what all this means?" the father interrupted the son. When I came 6 months ago, you didn't mention that you had someone else. Who is she? Is this your child? Artem persisted. And what if she is? Gleb challenged. This is my life, and I don't quite understand your obvious irritation. I thought I raised you well enough to know not to show disrespect to people you don't know, especially when it comes to their personal lives. Looking coldly at Masha, the young man snorted arrogantly and turned around, disappearing into the depths of the house. Sorry about that, muttered Gleb Alexandrovich, scratching his head and looking at the upset girl. I apologize for causing you discomfort. Don't worry, I'll talk to him about it. He's actually a very friendly guy and doesn't usually lash out at people, the man smiled, trying to smooth over the awkward situation. Dinner is ready. I'm starving, he added. Yes, I'll set the table now, nodded Masha, wiping Rex's paws and hurrying to the kitchen. I need to apologize, Gleb Alexandrovich said, causing Masha to nearly drop the plate of pasta she was serving. Artem's father told me everything. In short, I'm sorry for jumping to conclusions. I understand everything now, and I don't blame you. I'm very grateful to Gleb Alexandrovich for taking me in. If you've forgiven me, maybe we can switch to a more informal address? I feel old when people address me formally, the young man chuckled. He looked very young and strongly resembled his father, especially when he frowned. Masha had noticed this in the living room. Artem was tall and fit, with a light tousle of chestnut hair on his head that suited him well. The girl couldn't help but admit that he was very handsome, and blushed and looked away from him as he took a piece of cheese from her plate and winked, tossing it into his mouth. All right, I don't mind. Dinner is ready, you can sit down. Masha wiped the table and was about to leave the kitchen. Won't you join us? The young man frowned again. Of course, come on in. Gleb Alexandrovich entered the dining room. I have some news for you. Grab a plate and utensils and sit down. I won't take no for an answer, especially since my son has returned after so long. I don't want to disturb you if you have something to discuss, the girl protested. You won't disturb us, and besides, there's something I want to talk to you about, Artem interjected. The man pulled out a chair for the girl. Sit down, he said, winking at her and making her blush. It was easy and comfortable for her to be in the company of men, as if she had known them for a long time. Artem, without stopping, talked about his successes in school and how he had completed an internship at one of the London clinics. Gleb Alexandrovich's son followed in his father's footsteps and was soon to become a certified surgeon. Maria listened with admiration as the young man spoke, and saw how proud the doctor was of his son, who at 26 had already achieved so much in the world of science. Despite Gleb Alexandrovich's assurance that Artem wanted to return to his homeland and work in the clinic where his father had worked, reasoning that extra hands would never hurt, there were so many professionals in Europe who could do without him. After Artem shared all the news, Gleb Alexandrovich shared what he had learned from his longtime friend. While it was impossible to doubt the excellence of the clinic where Maria was on the register, there were many questions about the father of her child. Did you know that Sergei was married 3 times? Asked the man, leaving Maria in shock. And not only that, but each of his marriages lasted no more than a year and a half. The doctor made a theatrical pause and raised his finger. He could have had 3 children, 1 from each wife, but all the babies died during childbirth or within a few days after birth for various reasons. Maxim is currently working to find more information, but this is all he has been able to uncover so far. To obtain permission to access archival documents, grounds are required, which can only be obtained through the initiation of a criminal case, and for that, statements from the victims, that is, the former wives, are required. This scoundrel, Lord, made Masha shake her head, still not believing what she heard. And where are all these women now? It can't be a coincidence after what you told me. Most likely, it's a well-worked scheme of selling babies abroad. Now these women are being sought after and they hope they can help. If these children were also sold, they can be found and returned to their mothers. I don't know, Masha, I don't know. Gleb Alexandrovich shook his head, but I have no doubt that this is a big case. Maxim wants to talk to you if you don't mind. Of course, you can keep my whereabouts a secret if a criminal case is open against Sergei. He and possibly you will be witnesses in this case. Are you ready? Oh, of course, I want these terrible people to answer for their crimes, but I'm afraid it's too early to talk about it. We need irrefutable evidence that newborn babies were actually sold. That's why Sergei, his mother, and a few more clinic employees who treated his wives will be monitored and will try to find this evidence. I'm willing to cooperate, the girl nodded, if I can help in any way. Can I give birth first? Masha smiled, realizing that she was much luckier than other women who wished men good night. She went to her room, where she couldn't sleep for a long time because of the thoughts spinning in her head. She sincerely sympathized with these unfortunate women who were unlucky enough to become the wives of such a low and terrible person as Sergei. Oh, the girl put her hand on her stomach and smiled affectionately. But why are you kicking again? She asked in a gentle voice, stroking the spot where she felt the baby's movements. Can I touch? Artem asked, watching Masha. Of course, the girl smiled and turned to the young man. Artem put his hand on her stomach and also felt the light kicks. Wow, it's so incredible, he whispered in admiration. I'm going to be a doctor, but until now, he pointed to the stomach. It seems like a real miracle, the girl whispered, smiling. For the past few days, Artem couldn't take his eyes off of Masha, who lovingly communicated with her unborn child. The young man watched her and listened to her words as she whispered or sang songs to the baby, and he felt a pang in his heart. Only a mother could love like that, and deep down Artem regretted that he couldn't feel the strength of that love from his own mother. Although his father said she loved him very much, she didn't live to see his third birthday. She was hit by a car and suffered a head injury that was incompatible with life. Perhaps that's why Artem decided at a young age that he wanted to become a surgeon. It was just an amazing feeling, but now it was time to focus. Masha smiled again. If you want, we can talk tonight. Where are you going? The guy nodded and scratched his head, which reminded him of his father. I want to go to the mall. I need to buy something for the baby. Gleb Alexandrovich said it would be better for me to go to the hospital next week, as the due date is approaching. He offered to help me keep company. The young man looked embarrassed. Thank you, Artem, but I'll manage. I'll be at home. Do you remember that we're ordering pizza today? Dad said he'll be late, so you don't have to cook tonight. Masha nodded. She was happy to have a free evening in the company of the young man. They could watch a movie together. I'll pick something out then. Be careful, Artem said, without realizing that he was already worried about the girl he had become friends with during the 3 weeks he spent at his father's house. They walked Rex together, Artem helped Masha cook, and they talked a lot, finding common interests. The more time they spent together, the more they felt a mutual attraction, but neither of them wanted to admit it yet, or maybe they didn't even realize it. The situation itself did not imply it, but after spending several hours in the shopping center, Masha bought everything she needed and, after having lunch at a local restaurant, was about to call a taxi when she heard her name in the crowd. A sticky cold fear ran down her spine and she prayed that this voice was just a game of her wild imagination. She thought she heard Sergei call her name and her whole body was covered in fear. Masha heard that voice again and ran without looking back. She ran fast, ignoring the faces of surprised people who tried to stop her, and some even recoiled as if she were crazy. She felt Sergei running after her and thought she heard him say to someone, "I found her, this time she won't get away." Masha ran down the escalator, then through long corridors of the shopping center, past shop windows, and down several more floors. She stopped, trying to catch her breath and see something. Only then did she realize that tears were running down her face. Masha saw a revolving door to the street and ran towards it. She jumped into the first taxi she saw and shouted, "Faster! Please, go faster!" She looked back and saw Sergei running out and looking around. He saw her leaving in the car and Masha heard him shout something like, "I'll find you anyway. You're my child." He grabbed his phone and started calling someone. Masha asked the driver to drop her off near a bus stop. She was afraid that Sergei would follow her and decided to be cautious. After walking a few blocks, she felt a little calmer and caught another taxi. All the way home, Masha looked back and was afraid of seeing her pursuers. She felt her baby move and kept her hand on her stomach, which felt unpleasantly tight. Masha prayed that everything would be okay with her and the baby and wanted to be home as soon as possible. Only there, at Gleb Alexandrovich's place, she could feel safe. "I felt safe in the taxi. After paying the driver, we were already arriving home." Maria thought she saw a car with flashing lights at the end of the street, but she didn't dare to look at it. Even though she was scared, she hoped that Sergei wouldn't commit a crime, even if he found out where she was hiding. When she got inside the house, the girl locked the door with several locks and sat on the floor, exhaling and crying. Artem came out of the hallway and saw the girl in that state. He approached her and said that he saw her crying. He said that he would find her and that she shouldn't be afraid, that they wouldn't harm her. He said that he would call her father and warn him about what had happened, and if necessary, they would call the police. The young man sat in front of the girl and pulled her towards him, calming her down like a child and stroking her head. "Get up, let's go. There's no need to sit on the floor like this. You're just nervous." Artem helped Maria get up from the floor and supported her by the waist, leading her to the room. They were almost at the bed when the girl froze in place and whispered barely audibly, "Oh my God." Her head dropped down and the young man followed her movement with his eyes. After a couple of seconds, he understood the reason for her sudden stop. "My water just broke." Artem looked at Maria's widened eyes and tried to figure out what to do. He wasn't prepared for such a turn of events and was so confused that he didn't immediately realize what was really happening. He exhaled calmly, trying to calm himself down. "We'll call an ambulance now and go to the hospital, okay?" "No," Maria shouted, "not to the hospital, please. He'll find me there. He'll take my baby. Please, Artem." Without finishing her sentence, the girl grabbed her stomach and felt the contractions. 2 hours later, Maria gave birth to a daughter. It was already useless to call her. By the time she arrived at their settlement, Maria had already given birth, and Artem had helped her through the delivery. At first glance, the baby in the bedroom looked healthy and very loud. She screamed as soon as she appeared in the world. This time, Artem couldn't hold back his tears. He held the screaming baby in his arms and was happy. He had never seen anything more beautiful in his life. "I think I have to marry you after what happened," the boy laughed, wiping his nose and placing the baby on her mother's chest. Maria whispered through tears, "I agree." She kissed her baby's wet head and said, "Thank you, Artem, if it weren't for you." Suddenly, the phone rang, startling them. "Yes, Dad?" Artem answered quickly. "We have a surprise for you." And as if to confirm his words, the surprise erupted with a loud cry. Gleb Alexandrovich rushed into the house and ran to Maria's room, where the baby's cries could be heard. Opening the door, he saw a tired girl with a baby in her arms and a son with crazy but happy eyes that were fixed on the new mommy. "But you guys!" Gleb laughed. "You can't be left alone for a minute without causing trouble." The doctor approached the girl, ran his hand over her head as he had recently done with his son, and said, "She seems to be alive. Maria is a beauty, if it weren't for Artem." Gleb ran his finger over the baby's cheek. "But we need to look at both of you and make sure nothing threatens your health." Gleb Alexandrovich suddenly became serious. "I've already arranged a special vehicle at the clinic, but to avoid any suspicion." The doctor looked at Maria with the baby in her arms and then at his son. "I had to say that Maria is your wife." There was an awkward pause, and then the young people looked at each other and laughed loudly, remembering Artem's recent words about marriage. "It's okay, Dad. I'm not angry. I don't mind being Maria's husband, even if it's not for real." He smiled shyly. "I looked at the little girl, then at her mother, and thought that I really wouldn't mind if this lasted for a few days." Masha and the little girl spent some time in the clinic under observation. Masha named the girl Irina Gleb Alexandrovich, and Artem visited them regularly. He showered the girl with gifts and flowers, and Masha saw something in his eyes that she had never seen in Sergei's. But she tried not to analyze her thoughts and pushed them away, afraid to even think that there could be something more than friendship between them. Masha, for some reason, was sure that now that she had a child, she was not capable of attracting a decent man, especially someone like Artem. And the fact that she really liked this young man, she tried to hide even from herself. In one of his visits, Alexandrovich reminded Masha that Maxim, his old friend from the police, wanted to meet with her. The girl remembered that she promised to talk to him, and it was time to keep that promise. "I need your help, Maria," Maxim sighed. After she told him everything she knew, and he shared what he had found out, he said, "We have no evidence, only suspicions, your unconfirmed testimony and guesses. We couldn't find one woman, she left the city, and no one knows where." The second refused to dig up the past. "You said there were 3 of them, and yes, that's correct. Tomorrow was Sergei's 3rd wife. We are in touch with her, and she is ready to testify if necessary. By the way, she doesn't believe that her child died, and just like you, she suspects her husband. We are now checking some women who lost their children in hospitals where women were registered. There are a few strange coincidences, but we are still checking these versions. But these are just versions until a case is open that will free our hands, and we can conduct checks on a legal basis." "I don't understand how I can help," Masha shrugged, knowing all she knew. "I have already told him everything, but it's not enough to detain him. We need strong evidence or statements from you, and for that we need to make him act. Do you want my little one to become bait?" Maria almost jumped on the bed. "Are you out of your mind? I will never agree to such a thing. Maria, I understand that you're scared, but this is the only way to catch Sergei red-handed. We have been monitoring him for a long time, but apart from rare locks from abroad, we have nothing to hold on to. But if you understand that your daughter will be in danger, that he might try to steal her from you and sell her, then you must understand that this is the only way to catch him. We guarantee your safety and your daughter's, but I'm afraid we have no other way." How do you expect me to just go home as if nothing happened? Maria persisted. What if he suspects something? He's not a complete fool. If you agree, we'll think of the best way to do it so as not to raise suspicion and not put your health at risk, Maxim sighed. But looking at the silent girl and her doubts, he continued, if we leave things as they are now, you will never be safe, and you and your little one will have to hide for the rest of your lives. Do you want that? No, of course not. But I'm afraid they will take my daughter away from me. We won't let that happen, Maria. We only need a reason to put this scoundrel behind bars and expose those involved. What should I do? Maria asked, looking at her daughter. She knew that as long as these people were free, it was a big threat to her daughter's life and to other unborn babies, so she was willing to take the risk if it guaranteed them a peaceful life in the future. The next week was spent preparing and planning all the details, as well as anticipating risks and possible consequences if something went wrong. Despite the fact that practically every step was carefully planned, Maria was still anxious. The girl was still very nervous and afraid of messing up something when, on one of the gloomy days of the departing autumn, Masha entered the restaurant where she was supposed to meet Sergei. He was not particularly happy to see his failed wife and betrayer, but at the same time, the man was very interested in why she decided to come out of hiding. That's why when Masha called with an offer to meet, Sergei agreed without much thought. The man was surprised when he found out that the big belly he saw in their last meeting at the mall was no longer there. I see that I can congratulate you without hiding my venom, he smirked. Just like you, the girl lifted her chin and decided to get down to business. This is not just my child, although it doesn't matter. Now I need money. What were you thinking about when you left me a couple of weeks ago when you ran away from me on the escalator? What has changed now? I know everything. And what do you know? Sergei skeptically raised an eyebrow and crossed his arms over his chest, pretending not to understand what was going on. But the flash of panic that flickered in his eyes made Masha understand that he understood everything perfectly. She once again confirmed the rottenness of his wretched soul. I know that you wanted to sell our daughter. But I can turn a blind eye to it if you take me as a partner. You're out of your mind. What are you talking about? Sergei was genuinely surprised. If you wanted to leave me, you didn't have to come up with all this nonsense, extorting money for cheating. I'm not a fool, Serioza. I heard how your mother made a deal with a doctor. She noticed how the man's eyes widened, but it only lasted a moment. I can go to the police, or I can just disappear and live as a single mother, scraping by. I don't want that. I need to make my life better. And it will be good for everyone. What do you want? Sergei squinted. I said, I want you to take me on as a partner. I can't afford to have another child. I don't have a job or a decent place to live, so Masha shrugged. I understand that there are people who are willing to pay for a healthy baby and give them a normal family, which is better than being in an orphanage. And you can earn money. I don't believe you, Sergei. He fidgeted in place, looking around, sensing something was wrong. I don't care, Masha leaned over the table. Either you finish what you started or I'll find my own solutions. She gracefully rose from the table before leaving. I'll give you a day to think about it. I didn't expect you to be like this, Sergei. You seemed so quiet. Sergei smiled, but then became serious. Where the child is, you can't reach him. And don't try to fool me, otherwise everyone will know about your business. Masha made quotation marks with her fingers, then pulled out a piece of paper with a phone number from her pocket and threw it on the table before leaving the restaurant. The trembling girl walked to the bus stop and hopped on the bus to the address that Maxim had given her earlier. It was a small communal apartment on the outskirts of the city where they stayed for the duration of their operation. Police officers who accompanied the girl to the meeting later stayed in neighboring rooms for security. That evening, Maxim praised Masha for her convincing performance. He had heard and seen the entire conversation through a camera disguised as a large button on the girl's jacket. As they had suspected, after Masha left the restaurant, Sergei was followed by someone who immediately began calling and sending messages. That evening he met with a man whose identity had not yet been established. But their conversation, which lasted no more than half an hour, clearly indicated that they were dealing with a client or an important intermediary. The way he behaved towards Sergei and how he groveled before him clearly indicated that they had hit the jackpot in this business. When Sergei called the next day, the operatives set up a meeting, rubbing their hands together and assuring Masha that they only had to endure a little longer. I agreed, but I had a condition. I gave the man an address and he disconnected. Masha shuddered internally, guessing what the condition was, but there was no turning back. Maxim encouraged the girl, happy that they were on the trail, and Sergei had clearly taken the bait and had something to hold on to. But to make everything go smoothly, more evidence was needed. Undercover police followed Sergei and his men closely, monitoring every step. Additionally, surveillance was conducted on his mother just in case. When Sergei and Masha met, he handed her documents. After studying them, the girl became furious and all her suspicions were confirmed. By signing these documents, Masha completely relinquished her parental rights to her daughter, and the section where future guardians were supposed to be listed was empty. That's all I require. The girl restrained herself from scratching out the eyes of her former fiancé, who so easily disposed of an innocent life, his daughter's life. Yes, but I'll bring the child wherever I say, only after I see the money. And how much did you value our daughter? Masha couldn't help but be sarcastic. You'll get 50,000 euros. The girl was almost speechless. She realized that this wasn't even half the amount that was paid to Sergei. Now it's clear where a simple procurement manager got such a house and a fancy car. He probably made no less than 500,000 euros from other children, if not more. Masha hesitated, signing the papers as much as she could. She carefully studied the documents several times, rereading the same thing over and over again. Sergei was clearly nervous, constantly checking his watch and hurrying the girl. When a car appeared on the papers, he gave her the address and time to bring the girl. Masha was still doubtful and tried to persuade the investigator that there was already enough evidence to put this scoundrel in jail. She didn't want to part with Irina even for a few minutes and leave her with strangers. But Maxim insisted on finishing the job and assured the girl that everything was under control. Holding her daughter tightly, Masha obeyed. She was standing in a deserted rural parking lot, looking around nervously. It seemed like she had made a mistake coming here, as there was nobody around and all she could see were abandoned factory buildings and empty fields. Time passed, but nothing changed and nobody appeared. Sergei wasn't answering her calls and Masha was already thinking of calling Maxim. But then a large minivan pulled up and the doors opened invitingly for her. As soon as she got in and the car started moving, her phone rang. They will drop you off in a few blocks. The money will be in the trunk. You can pick it up when the car stops. Leave the child in the car. There's a special seat on the back seat. That's all the instructions, Sergei said. Good luck, Masha. He literally spat out her name. And I hope I never see you again. I hope the same, Sergei. Masha copied his tone. Just remember, if you betray me, it won't just be you who suffers, but your offspring as well. Do you understand? How can you sell your own daughter? Masha couldn't hold back her tears and asked the question that had been tormenting her for a long time. I'm not selling her, dear. And what about you? He laughed menacingly and hung up. Masha felt shivers down her spine. Something in his words had alarmed her, but she tried to ignore it. Right now, the most terrifying thing was leaving her daughter, who was fast asleep in the car with a complete stranger whose face she couldn't even see because of the tinted partition. Trying to hold back her tears and praying that it would all be over soon, Masha took a deep breath and ignored the rising alarm. She promised herself that she would see this through to the end, if it guaranteed her daughter a peaceful life. When the car stopped, Masha trembled and got out. One last look at the arena, she opened the doors and stepped onto the busy street. She flinched again when she heard a sudden honk and remembered that she had to retrieve the money. Masha approached the trunk, which opened immediately, and grabbing a large sports bag without even glancing at its contents. She hadn't even closed the trunk when the car suddenly sped off with a loud screech and disappeared behind the nearest building. Sobbing loudly, the girl gave into tears and covered her face with her hands. The thought that she was unworthy of being a mother because she couldn't come up with another way to protect her child and personally handed him over to the criminals tore her apart. Tears streamed down her face, and everything blurred before her eyes. Masha stepped up to the brick wall and, placing the bag on the pavement, slid down the wall while continuing to cry. She vaguely remembered what happened next, as if in a fog. Suddenly, 2 cars with flashing lights pulled up, and several people in uniform surrounded her, twisting her arms and handcuffing her, not allowing her to say a word. She kept insisting that it was a mistake and that they had clearly arrested the wrong person, but the police officers just threw scornful glances at her. She vaguely remembered being locked in a cell where she sat for several long hours, or maybe even days. She was so lost in reality that her mind simply refused to function and comprehend anything. It felt like an eternity had passed. She began to scream, begging for her phone or to call Maxim. Masha pounded on the door with her hands, demanding to be heard, but no one responded. When she was completely exhausted and curled up in a ball on the hard bench, silently sobbing, the door suddenly opened. "Get out," a man in uniform said gruffly, pushing her in the back and escorting her to a room. As Masha understood it, she was there for questioning. "What's going on? Why was I arrested?" she asked as soon as the investigator entered the room. "Don't pretend you don't know," the man frowned and gestured to someone behind her. Then, as if from nowhere, another person appeared and placed the bag on the table. The same one she had taken from the trunk of the car where she had left her daughter. The memories flooded back, and she felt overwhelmed. Tears rolled down the girl's cheeks again, which the investigator apparently interpreted in his own way and skeptically asked, "Where's my daughter?" "He took my child." "You're wasting your time while real criminals are selling children," Masha spat out with anger. "What are you talking about?" the man asked mockingly. "We have completely different information." And what girl made a deep sigh to deal with this madness? "Sergei Igorevich Savelyev is familiar to you, right? He's the father of my daughter and my ex-fiancée." "And what?" Masha froze, anticipating something very bad, and the man's mocking look only confirmed it. "He claims that you blackmailed him, ran away from home, and extorted money by threatening to sell your daughter. In the end, Sergei Igorevich turned to us for help, fearing for the child's life. He provided a certificate that you are registered with a psychiatrist." "Is that so? What nonsense are you talking about?" Masha jumped up from the chair, which crashed to the floor. "I'm not crazy, and he's the one who threatens my child. He wanted to sell her, so I escaped. Sit down, Maria Nikolaevna, or we'll have to call the doctors to give you another sedative. What do you mean, another sedative? Masha looked at the man and, picking up the chair, sat on it, feeling pain and resentment at herself for being so foolish as to fall into the trap of this scoundrel. You're grasping at straws. When we brought you in, you were just given sedatives, the man shrugged. Let's continue. I'll repeat it again. I'm not crazy. But Sergei definitely wanted to sell my daughter. Yes, he warned me that in the context of the heightened paranoia that you have an obsessive idea that someone wants to sell your child, he was afraid that the situation would worsen after the birth. It's nonsense and blatant lies. He probably just bought that certificate. I have no paranoia. Masha began to suffocate from helplessness and the absurdity of everything happening. How do you explain that then? The man moved closer. The bag is closer. What is this money? The girl sighed and wiped away her tears, straightening up as if she had an epiphany. I need to call Maxim. He's one of yours. Let him tell you everything. I won't say anything more. The investigator frowned, but an hour later he was listening to a strange story about a girl who ran away from her husband to protect her child. Maxim, who arrived immediately after the phone call, told them about a secret operation that was not conducted with the girl and how she stopped communicating. After leaving the child in the car, they brought in a black minivan to a private airport where the child was supposed to be handed over to the client. Then they negotiated with a private airline to prevent takeoff because they couldn't reach the child's mother. Risking the baby's life, they staged a raid just before takeoff and detained everyone on board. Sergei was not among these people, but a woman on the plane who was accompanied by 2 guards had documents about custody and threatened to put everyone behind bars for not returning her child to her in Spain. The woman's name was Zhanna. She was originally from Russia, but a few years ago she married a Spaniard and moved to live with her husband. As she told her children, they couldn't have a child of their own, so they decided to adopt the baby from the garden. However, it later emerged that this was the same Zhanna who had been in Russia for several months and, according to her husband, was about to give birth. Andrei, Zhanna's husband, was very surprised to learn about the custody case, as he was sure his wife was pregnant. She left for her homeland, saying that she wanted to give birth there because she had good acquaintances in the clinic and could only trust them for the delivery. They maintained contact through video calls, where the happy woman boasted about her round belly. With her belly and speaking about how she misses and waits for her return home due to Andrei's constant busy schedule at work, he couldn't come to Russia and his wife didn't insist on it. Moreover, she even discouraged him from doing so. Therefore, he patiently waited for his wife's return with their child. During the questioning, it was revealed that due to an early abortion, Jean couldn't have children. But knowing how much Andrei dreamed of having a baby, she couldn't bring herself to confess to him. So she found another way to solve the problem, simply buy a newborn and pass it off as their own. She didn't think about the consequences, as the people involved had been verified and had carried out similar deals many times, selling babies abroad. Of course, this pleasure was not cheap, and Jean had to go into debt and sell her property in her homeland to pay for the newborn. But she knew it was worth it, as after the birth of the child, he inherited the entire family's fortune, and since her husband was the sole heir, the only thing left to do was to find a new baby. And that's what she did, turning to old acquaintances. Angry that her plan had failed and that her husband now knew everything and she faced a sentence, Jean revealed everything she knew. And now the police had all the perpetrators and intermediaries involved in the case, except for Sergei, who managed to escape. But it was only a matter of time before his mother was arrested, and when they pressed her, threatening her with a long sentence, she broke down and claimed that she was forced to do it and was not guilty. She also talked about her former wives and their soul babies, hoping that if she cooperated with the investigation, she would receive a lesser sentence. As for Sergei, let him get out of this mess on his own, the woman thought, and turned him in. Masha had already breathed a sigh of relief when the detective apologized for his rough treatment and mockery, took her testimony and let her go. But she was immediately shocked by the authentic documents she had signed earlier, which meant she was no longer the girl's mother. And until she proved otherwise, Irina would be placed in a nursery, as everything had already been arranged. We were aware that it was a necessary measure for a good cause and the document collection was just a formality, but without this formality, Masha's child was not being given away. They only allowed to feed and rock the baby, and she was in shock and anger, expressing her thoughts to Maxim. All he could do was apologize and shrug, saying that nobody knew it would come to this, but he tried his best to speed up the process. But as they say, every cloud has a silver lining. Vitaly Petrovich, a friend of yours, is here and says that an investigator urgently came to his door regarding the case of selling newborns. The man sighed and rubbed his face. Such a commotion. Don't worry, Mom, he said to himself, and looked at the young man. Let him in. A disheveled young man rushed into the office and started sorting through some papers in his hands. Who are you? The man asked, tiredly. I'm the father of the girl, Artem proudly explained and handed over the birth certificate that confirmed his words. A week after Irina's birth, Masha went to the registry office to obtain a birth certificate, and the young man who accompanied her saw her hesitation when her hand froze over the father field. What are you thinking about, Mom? Her colleague from the department rushed her. You need to write the father's initials. And if he's not there, put a dash. Masha looked up at Artem, her eyes shining with tears, and he just nodded, giving her his silent consent. She smiled and nodded back, saying much more than a simple thank you, and registered her daughter under his surname. The new birth certificate read Arskaya Irina Artemovna and smelled of fresh paper and ink. Artem kissed the baby's forehead and touched her mother's cheek with his lips, but there was no time for sentimentality, as they had a meeting scheduled with Maxim to discuss the operation. Where were you before? The investigator chuckled. Studying Vitaly's document intently, Maxim entered the room and looked at Artem. Hello, Tymik, he shook the guy's hand. I was looking for his mother while you were questioning her. I found out that she can take the little girl. So sign the papers and let's go, we're all tired and have no more strength. And I feel like I'm not tired, the investigator waved his hands. I still have to work with papers until night. All right, Dad, go and get them. They're in the room at the end of the corridor, Artem said, entering the room. His eyes immediately met with Masha's tearful eyes and the broad smile on the guy's face. She understood that everything was all right and started crying again. Thank you, the girl whispered, holding the sleeping baby closer to herself. Let's go home, Father is waiting downstairs with a smile, the guy said, handing the signed papers to the social worker and taking the girl's daughter without asking for permission. He mentally thanked God that everything turned out all right and they were returning home safe and sound. Sergei was detained at the Finnish border a few days later. The man tried to leave the country with fake documents, but failed. He did not deny his involvement in the case and hoped for leniency. He understood that the people behind this business wouldn't let him live, so it would be better for him to go to prison than to die. During the questioning, he named the names of the clients and told about all the schemes worked out over the years. He was accused of serious crimes in court and sentenced to 12 years of imprisonment in a strict regime colony, with 2 of his wives having left him. At the trial, the man was showered with curses and wishes to rot in prison and never be released. Of course, they promised to help return the children, but it was very difficult considering that they had been living abroad in foster families for several years. Police officers promised to do everything possible and at least try to return the children who were taken from the women by deception. The defendants in this high-profile case were also convicted and served their punishment, and Maxim, for his disclosure of a crime related to children that received widespread publicity throughout the country, was soon offered to lead the operational department, which he gladly accepted. A year passed. Maria, do you agree to become Artem's wife, to be with him in sorrow and joy, in wealth and poverty, in sickness and health, until death do you part? Yes, I do, Maria beamed. And you, Artem, the woman in the elegant dress with a burgundy folder in her hands asked with a smile. Yes, I do, the young man replied, breaking into a happy smile as he looked at his newlywed wife. Applause rang out in the backyard of the country house, and then live music began to play. Congratulations, son, Gleb Alexandrovich hugged his son and patted him on the back. Take care of your wife and daughter. Then he turned to his daughter-in-law and pulled her into a strong paternal embrace. I couldn't have imagined a better wife for him, she whispered in the girl's ear. A couple of grandchildren more, and I'll be able to retire in peace, the man laughed. Definitely, Maria smiled, but only after Artem finishes his studies and we return home. Congratulations to the newlyweds, the mother's car approached, tightly embracing her daughter first and then her son-in-law. On her arms, she was waving little hands of Gukul and Arisha, whom the woman handed over to her daughter. Be happy, my dear Masha. Let's have a snack, and it's time to go to the airport. Artem stroked his wife's back and kissed her on the lips. Rex will miss you. Gleb patted the dog, who was wagging her tail nonstop and trying to lick someone. Dad, don't start. We'll be back in 6 months. You won't have time to miss us, Artem laughed. A few hours later, Maria and Irina were already riding in a taxi through the beautiful streets of London to their apartment, where they will spend the next few months while Artem finishes his residency. Then they will all return home and continue their happy life. Now, the young people have not yet told their parents the news they learned a few days ago, as they decided that they would understand it themselves when they return home, especially since Gleb Alexandrovich and Natalia Mashana's mother have found a common language and have already agreed on a joint dinner, which Natalia promised to prepare. The doctor did not yet know that Mashana's mother, who recently broke up with her latest suitor, bakes amazing pies and prepares the most delicious borscht in the world. It is quite possible that by the time the young family returns home, they will be waiting for news of another wedding.